Hey everybody, this is going to be our Inkscape bitmap tracing and preparation for laser cutting tutorial. So today we're going to just be finding some sort of interesting graphic on the internet, and we're going to be turning it into a vector that we will be able to send over to the laser cutter. So I'm going to just pick kind of something fun and random that I think may be good for doing some bitmap tracing. So we're going to go ahead and type in YanCat, and I'm going to look over in images, and you're going to see that I get a lot of different options here for choosing things. And some of these are going to be better for bitmap tracing than others. Kind of the standard YanCat is kind of over here. It's from the original video. And this might be okay. One of the big problems with something like this is that it's got a background color and a lot of different complexities here. And so it may not be the best selection for bitmap tracing. Similarly, you can see some things over here where maybe you've got gradient images. These aren't going to be great either, or a lot of complexity here. And so what we really want to do is just kind of find the simplest version of what it is that we're looking for. So I'm going to select on this one. It's not a very large image, as you can see, but we're going to give it a shot and see what the bitmap tracing does with it. And I think it may make for a kind of a fun laser cut. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this and open up Inkscape. So here we go. And one of the first things I'm going to do in Inkscape is adjust my document size. So I'm going to go into document properties, and I want to change my default units over to inches and my units over here to inches. And I'm going to focus on something that's about 10 inches by 10 inches. So I'm going to make that square here. And you can see that it actually automatically updated our board here. So when we're done with that, we can just go ahead and close. And we copied that image, so we can just go up to Edit and click Paste. And you can see that it's going to kind of drop that image right onto the page. So if we zoom in on this, what you're going to notice is that it starts getting really blurry. This is because this is a raster-based design as opposed to a vector. So that's where our bitmap tracing comes into play. So if we come up over here to our menu and click on Path, you can see that there's an option that says Trace Bitmap. So we're going to go ahead and click that. And what we want to do is we want to kind of click on this live preview, and that's going to show us how it's going to interpret all the information. Now, the way that it is going to trace, we have a couple different options. The first one, and really the most common, is what's called brightness cutoff. You can see it's got a threshold value here, and what it says is essentially anything at 0.45 brightness above or below either gets turned into black and white. Now you can see with this that we've kind of got some dark pink sprinkles on top of light pink frosting, and you can see that those aren't actually getting picked up by the program, and that's why this live preview window is so useful. And so one of the things you can do is kind of just mess around with values. You'll notice that at some point it looks like I can get those sprinkles, but at the expense of the cat's face. And so this is just one of the complexities about that. But for most bitmap traces, this actually will work pretty well, especially if you're using simple graphics. Another thing that you can use is what's called edge detection, and that's going to be looking for kind of like interrupted areas. So for something like this, where you can see that there is kind of some pretty distinct edges between the graphics, you can see that the edge detection is going to work pretty well. So we're going to try this one and kind of see what the results give us. So if we click OK, notice that I just click it once, and you might have noticed that the graphic changed just a little bit. It may have been a little hard to see, but it for sure did something. So we can go ahead and close this down, and if I click and drag on top of my graphic, you can see that it's now kind of separated it out. So as we zoom in, there's kind of a little bit of some weird stuff going on here. You can see that it didn't exactly kind of cut off all the right places. So we did get our sprinkles, but it looks like we lost a little bit more of our cat. So that's not exactly what I want to do. So I'm going to delete him, and I'm going to go back, and I'm going to go for that brightness cutoff, because what I can do later on is I can always go back in and add those sprinkles in manually. So I'm going to go ahead and go with this one, Again, didn't look like it did a lot, but if we click and drag off, we'll see that we should in fact get our kitty cat. So we can do is we can kind of verify, and you can see that no matter how far we zoom in on that, it's going to be really, really smooth. And so we can go ahead and discard this one. We don't really need it anymore. And here's kind of what we are left with. Now, some of the issues associated with this is that this isn't really how the laser thinks about this design. These kind of look like lines, but they're actually solid shapes. So what we're going to do is we're going to come down to this bottom left-hand corner with our graphic selected, and we're going to click on the X, and that's actually going to take away all the fill from our design. And if we hop over just one square and right-click and hit Set Stroke, now what we see is what the laser cutter is really going to see. And so with this, we can see that these are pathways that it's going to trace around based on the instructions that we give it. So if we select on this, and we're going to come up to path and break it apart, what that'll do is this will kind of break it down into just its very like primary components. And so if you wanted to adjust the eye or the nose, you can now do those separately. What I'm going to do, and we're going to see if this is working, I'm going to select this kind of outermost layer, and I'm going to right click on red and hit Set Stroke. And what you can see is that by doing that, we've been able to essentially differentiate the outside path from the inside path. And the reason why I'm doing this is for the laser, what I'm going to have it do is actually cut this outside path. So we're going to cut this out of a piece of material, and I'm going to have it etch this inside path. And so by having them as two different colors, that allows you to set the laser with two different settings. So when we want to cut, chances are we're going to use either a much higher power or a much slower cutting speed to really get through that material. Whereas with these inside pieces, we're going to be using lower power or higher cutting speed just to kind of graze the top of that material. So this looks pretty okay. I think we're going to go with this. So the next thing we need to do is actually save it in a format that our laser cutter understands. So we'll come up to File and Save As. And in our extension, we're going to scroll down until we see this desktop cutting plotter, and it says it's AutoCAD DXF R14.DXF. So the DXF is what we're really interested in. So we're going to click on that. We're going to click Save. Now you may get some options in here. I've had the best luck with unclicking these options here. And for base units, and this is really important, we're going to want to export it in inches. Now before we do that, we do want to make sure that we have this kind of size the way that we want. And so kind of looking back on what we have, I was kind of looking for something that was maybe 10 inches by 10 inches. And so we're going to go ahead and click on it. We want to make sure that everything gets scaled. And I'm going to try to make this as kind of fill this space. Maybe leave a little bit of space on each side. But I do want to have a pretty big Nyan cat here. So there we can see that he's filling up that space pretty well. So now that he's saved up, we'll go to that DXF. We'll click Save. Again, our base units is in inches. When we click on OK, we should see that it has saved out as drawing.dxf. And that's going to be the file that will load up in the laser cutter software and cut it out and see what we get.